Hello, how are you doing? Thanks for joining me again. I hope you're well. Right, what are we doing today? Well, I have been asked to test a camera which I think is going to be gifted to somebody, and it's an eBay find, so they want to make sure that it actually works before gifting it. So I've got it for the day, and I'm going to shoot a roll of film, and I'm not going to do a full test like I would do if I was testing a new SLR or something. It's just to make sure that actually some photos do come out at the end of it, because it's just a fun gift. But it would be a shame if the person who gets it takes a roll of fun snaps and nothing comes out. So I am guinea pigging it, if that's a word or a phrase. Don't think it is. Anyway, let me give you a clue as to what kind of camera it is by showing you the film I've been given to test it with. And it's this Lomo Tiger film. I've never tried Tiger in any format, but it's a 110 film. I think Lomo are the only people that make 110 film nowadays. It used to be a Kodak thing. But can you guess what kind of camera it is? Let me show you. How about that? That is dinky, isn't it? It is the Hanimex VXL. And if you compare it with the size of a 35mm camera, you can see it is really dinky. It's even smaller than the half frame camera I think that I was using. But the negatives are tiny too. I think they're quarter frame as 35mm equivalents go. So it's going to be fun to use the new scanning setup that I showed you last time to see if I can get anything out of those negatives. Now this camera, it seems to be quite sophisticated for a little point and shoot. It's actually got a focusing wheel here, so you can actually adjust the focus on it, and it has aperture settings here, so you can go all the way from 1.9, which is really quite a wide aperture, to f16. And I think that was the selling point of this, or one of the selling points, that it could work in very low light and still you wouldn't need a flash. There is a flash hot shoe on there, but there's no built-in flash. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? I love that little silver wrist strap. This is so 70s. It's got a great feel to it. It really takes me back to my childhood. Looking through the viewfinder, there are frame lines, but there's no focusing information in there. There's no parallax information either, but no focusing. So you're just going to have to go off the scale here and hope that you're accurate. And at 1.9, I guess you are going to have to be pretty accurate. So I'm going to try and keep it for most of the time closer to the f16. I've had a look around this camera and I can't see any way of setting the ISO. I've got ISO 200 film, but hopefully it works without any adjustment. I don't know if the metering works. There's a little battery in here which controls the meter, and a little light does come on next to the viewfinder when you slide the dial here. Don't know if you can see, a little red light comes on. So it is doing something. Whether it's doing anything worthwhile is yet to be seen. I won't have to worry, I don't think, about light leaks with this camera, which is nice, because old cameras usually have light leak problems, because one of the selling points of 110 was it was a cartridge-based film. So everything is hidden within a plastic cartridge, which keeps it protected from the light, unless there's a leak here around the lens, I guess. Right, so shall we load up and see what we can get? It's actually quite a nice day in Stockport. It's one of the first days that it's not been raining, and there might even be some sunshine later on. So I think we should get out, make the most of it. I'll take some pictures out and about and in cafes and things to make the most of the low light capabilities. So the film's in its little protective metal sheath. I'll just open the camera up first of all. There it is, 200 colour negative Tiger. You can see that's the bit that will be exposed there, and this is the cartridge with the little wind on bit. It is so tiny, isn't it? Look at that. These little arrows will go through and you'll see the number of the exposure that you're on, so we'll know where we're up to. There we go, drops in there like that. Lovely. Close the door. And we're ready to shoot. Well, when we've wound it on, we are. We are on frame one. Right, let's get out to Stockport. Right, so for our first shot, let's give the camera every chance. So, very clear view from here to infinity. Some writing saying Garrick Theatre and Hat Museum, so we can see if that comes out. And I will set the camera to infinity, and I will use the narrowest aperture, bright sunshine, so there shouldn't be anything to go wrong, so this one should work. famous last words, you should never say this one's going to work, because it didn't. As you can see from this, it seemed like there was plenty of light for f11 to be an effective f-stop, but when I got the film back from the lab, I found that the first frame was completely blank. I was a little bit worried that that was going to be true of all the frames, but as you will see, it wasn't. So I wound on after the first frame and went round the corner where I saw an interesting sign next to some green foliage, and there was a bottle by the sign, so I thought that might make quite a nice little composition, and I took a picture of it, and that one did come out. As you can see here, it's quite interesting the way it has a main central section, and then there's a frame where it's obviously been exposed but not in the same way. It's very odd, but it's interesting. I really like that effect. While I was taking this picture, I actually noticed that there was a strange noise and rustling coming from the bushes. There was somebody chopping back the foliage on a ladder, and I snapped a quick picture of them. And in fact, that image is far more interesting than the first image that I took. The ramp sign and the ladder make a nice kind of angle, and the blue of the person and the red of the sign work well with the faded green and the brick of the wall. So that's actually quite an interesting image. I really like it. And obviously the settings were correct for that in a way that they weren't correct for the first image, which was obviously horribly underexposed. Now that was interesting. When I actually took the picture, the parallax lines suddenly knocked down, so they do move, but there's something wrong with them. So I'm heading to one of my favourite areas now, which is Canal Street. It's just off Hillgate. If you watched my Hillgate video, it's just off there. So we're on Canal Street. There's lots of nice graffiti everywhere, artwork. I've shot most of it before, so I don't want to just redo what I've done already for the sake of doing it on a video. But there's always something interesting along here. There's a van full of engines here. I mean, I don't know, might make a good shot. Equally, sort of Banksy style work. It might all make good shots, but what should I take a picture of? What is going to see its camera? Let's see. Okay, so this is a picture of me taking a picture. It's going to be rubbish.
Actually, it wasn't rubbish. It was a really interesting shot. I like it in particular because it's a meta picture, and it has a theme which runs through a lot of my work, people staring at screens and how we consume the world now, not directly, but via our phones. It's a bit of a cliche now, isn't it? But, you know, I like the idea. And again, there's this idea in street photography that when we go out and shoot the street, often we're actually shooting ourselves and projecting our own thoughts and ideas into things that we decide to photograph. So this is kind of an almost literal interpretation of that. So anyway, after I'd taken this shot, I moved on to take some more pictures around the Hillgate area.
Okay, now this is a shot that I really want to come out, and I'm probably going to take it on my phone as well, because a kind of pedigree chum and some burnt out cigarettes by the pub, and it's just kind of that weird juxtaposition. So we'll try and get it on the film, but it probably won't come out, so I'm going to try and get it on the phone afterwards.
Well, it did come out, but in a very, very poor exposure, and it doesn't really get the message across, does it? The composition isn't that great either, and that's partly to do with the framing lines not working in the camera, but it's also because the elements of this picture are too far apart, and with the lens that there is on there, I couldn't really do justice to it digitally either, just with a phone camera. But there you go, some you win, some you lose. But from a camera test point of view, the main thing is it's a really rubbish exposure, isn't it?
Okay, so I'm going to attempt some layering here. So I'm going to use this as the front layer, middle layer, back layer, maybe somebody going through, see how it goes.
Again here, the exposure is completely wrong. There's also what looks like some ghosting flare, dust spots on the negative, but the main thing is the metering is completely off, and I was obviously doing something wrong here.
Right, I'm going to find a little bench to sit on, because I want to show you, I think I've worked out how this meter works. So this adjusts the aperture. Off means that the meter is not being used, and I guess it must be on f18 or whatever. So f16 through to 1.9 is a smooth scale, and if I hold it down as I slide it, you might be able to see that a light comes on, and it'd be on one side or the other. Now if it's on the right hand side, it's underexposed. It's on the left hand side, it's overexposed. So if you find when both lights are on, that is somewhere between f5.6 and f8. So that should be the correct aperture. We can take our picture. It's a shame I didn't work that out before I took most of my frames, but hopefully my guesstimation based on my experience will be quite accurate. Anyway, that's how it works, or doesn't. Right, let's get on and take a few more pictures.
So having worked that out, I went looking for another composition to shoot and ended up lurking in a little alleyway, waiting for someone to walk past because I thought that might make an interesting composition. And I think it is quite an interesting composition. I quite like the shadow of the railings on the far right. Unfortunately, I think the metering I did was not quite accurate. It's underexposed, and that means that the figures in the distance are a little bit muddy. I think it's all a little bit cluttered. I was getting hungry by this time and decided to nip into McDonald's and get an early lunch. As always, I took a picture. That's what we do in the modern age, isn't it? We take photos of our food. I always like to take a picture of a McDonald's because I know what the colours should look like. So it's always a good reference to see whether the reds, the yellows came out. And it's also a good way to test the minimum focusing distance of the camera because it's always quite close up. This was at the minimum focusing distance and it was still slightly out of focus. But the exposure isn't too bad. But yeah, I think the meal was better than the photograph. After I'd eaten, I had to leave Stockport to go to Cheadle to carry out a couple of chores, and so I thought I'd just use up the rest of the film there and snapping anything I might see from the bus window. And actually I think I got my best picture while I was waiting for my bus to pull out of Stockport interchange. I was up on the top deck and I think one of the bus drivers had gone out to check something about the rear of his bus, and it was just a really nice image. The position of the figure and the silhouetting almost in the little V shape of light in the darkness of the rest of the interchange really works for me. And at the top you can just see the rooftops of Stockport above the interchange, and I just love this sort of retro feel of this. It's really interesting, and I don't think it would have worked as a sharp digital print or even a sharp film print. It's something to do with the loss of detail that makes it almost like a painting. You can put your own ideas, your own thoughts, your own emotions into this in a way that you couldn't if it was totally clear what you were looking at. I love the muted tones, the grain in this, and it's the one picture that probably justified the whole roll. So I'm really glad I got this picture. So the rest of the shots were taken in Cheadle. There's a not very interesting one of a furniture warehouse and somebody walking past. The exposure was fine, but the focusing was completely off. And this is, again, just an issue with the camera. This is an image of what I think is the telephone exchange and the masts going up from the roof. And it could have been quite a nice moody shot, but it's just fogged and underexposed and just muddy. And this is when the meter was supposed to be helping me out. I don't know if it's because of the ISO not being what it was expecting. Maybe the meter is designed for 400 speed film. I didn't have the manual. I still don't have the manual, so I don't really know why. But it's not really a great use of the negative, is it? And here you can see all the pictures that came out. So yeah, 13 out of 24 shots that actually had some information on them. That's not a great hit rate. And I'm afraid at this point, I have to say, I don't think this is really a camera that would be a good thing to gift to somebody other than somebody who would like to use it as an ornament. I don't really think it's useful as a tool, certainly not for somebody who wants to have a snappy camera and have fun without really understanding what they're doing. In terms of the expense of owning the camera, the 110 film isn't cheap and it's hard to get hold of, and the developing, it cost me twice as much at the lab that I used to develop this 24 exposure film than it does to have 35mm colour negative film developed. So if I used the Ektar half frame camera, I could get 72 shots for the price of 12 shots. It's a lovely looking thing. It's dinky, it's fun. I'm really glad that I got a chance to use it, but I don't think many people would want to receive it as a gift, and I'm going to suggest it might be worth looking for a half-frame camera for the gift recipient, and this lovely little vintage relic can be put on a shelf as an ornament.
So there you go, the Hanimex VXL. What are your thoughts? It would be great to hear from you. Do pop a comment down below if you've got the time. If you have time as well, it would really help me out. I know I've got to say it. subscribe if you haven't already, like, share. It just gives me a justification to keep making these videos, which I kind of love doing anyway, but it's just nice to know that there's people out there enjoying it, watching it. Yeah, that's it for this time. Don't know quite when I'll be back. It's holiday season now, all sorts of things are going on, but I will try and put another video out as soon as I can. Until I do, take care of yourselves, enjoy whatever you're shooting. Bye for now.